Krishna, everyone. How are you today? Me, I'm doing swell. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This is how the Srimad Bhagavatam begins. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome, Yuri and Jalar. Thank you for letting me know that. Audio is good. So, not sure how many of you have read the Srimad Bhagavatam yet, at least the first canto, or the first few cantos. I encourage you to keep reading this scripture, called the Srimad Bhagavatam, as much as you can, as often as possible. From the scripture you will find all the answers that you are seeking relating to every single subject matter. So, Krishna appears in a certain sequence of forms in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the stories relating to his various pastimes are relayed in a very specific ordered sequence related to these forms in which he appears. Now, as Krishna devotees, we of course appreciate all of these forms. Welcome, Kakadidas. And we very deeply appreciate these forms because naturally they come from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source of all expansions and all avatars. Now, these first forms that he appears in are animal forms, Jaya Shri Radhe, or man mixed with animal forms. Now, many people will just look at this and they will see it as something, it's just mythological, it's symbolic, why would the Supreme Personality of God appear in these forms unless it was some astrological symbolism or something like that? That must just be what it is. People say that who haven't actually read the texts. Because once you actually read the text and the purports, you will see that that's not the case, actually, at all. Symbols come from reality. So in other words, there are real events and activities, personal face-to-face things that go on universally, that are the source of symbols and symbolism, which are also then the source of the zodiacal signs and the astrological signs. Never the other way around. So always keep this in mind. So many devotees, they just may read these pastimes, oh, that's nice, that's cool that Krishna appeared in that form and did this and did that. But very few individuals, even among Krishna devotees, ask themselves very deeply, well, why specifically did Krishna appear as a fish? Why specifically did he appear as a boar? Why specifically as a half-man, half-lion? Why did he specifically appear as a dwarf? Why didn't he just appear, as a dragon? Why didn't he just appear as, as a fox? Or why didn't he just appear as a hawk? Or why didn't he appear as all these other different forms, or a velociraptor or whatever? Why does he specifically appear as these exact forms that he appears in? Well, the answer to that question is quite simple, actually. So, over the course of this presentation, I will request all of you to exercise your devotional common sense more than anything else here. And it will be that much easier for you to understand why Krishna appears in these forms. It's actually far less complicated than most would assume or think. So, we know, of course, that the Srimad Bhagavatam culminates in the pastimes of Radha and Krishna in the 10th canto. And then after that, Krishna's pastimes are concluded in the forms that he takes later, specifically referring to the devastation of the universe. I should say when he comes as Kalki first, and then later on, the devastation of the universe, etc. All these last things are covered in the end of the Bhagavatam. Then once you're finished with the Bhagavatam, the whole concept is to read it over again, right? Over and over and over again, ever fresh, ever new pastimes. So on the first read through, what's supposed to occur to the consciousness of the devotee who's reading this, they're supposed to look back at all of this and like, okay, we spent the first 9 cantos getting to the form of Krishna specifically, and his relationships with the gopis of Vrindavana. But we're told all throughout the Bhagavatam that the entirety of the Bhagavatam is eternally significant and ever fresh and new. But then you look at the pastimes and you read them over and over again. It's like, well, I've read this pastime before. I know all the details. I'm familiar with it and things. But, see? Then you have to ask, then what's supposed to happen to the consciousness is you're supposed to start thinking about, wait, how is it ever fresh then when I'm reading through again, right? So we know that Krishna is always meditating on Sri Radha's form, her personality. Literally everything Krishna does, says, all of his thoughts, all of his activities are 100%, 108%, specifically for the purpose of increasing his meditation on the form of Sri Radha and encouraging us to do the same, which in turn inspires us to meditate on his form also, of course. But his focus is to get us to meditate on Sri Radha's form, and then her focus is to get us to meditate on his form. So this is where you have Lord Chaitanya come in, of course. And because of Lord Chaitanya, we have the Srimad Bhagavatam presented to us, and we have the Chaitanya Charitamrita explaining these things. So, knowing this fact right off the bat about Krishna, it can already start to register immediately as to why Krishna would appear as these avatars. Right? Things can start to click in the brain. So that's the whole point. You read the Srimad Bhagavatam a second time, and now you notice all these things that you didn't notice before about his avatars, about the words that are used in the verses, right? About the characters involved, about the things that happen. And then you start to get some hints here. Krishna starts winking at you, hinting to you to recognize very cool things. So, we're going to start with Matsya. So Krishna appeared at a time in history, and keep in mind, these various forms Krishna appears in, he appears at different times throughout ages, because the universe is incredibly vast in age. So there's these partial devastations that happen. So the universe gets destroyed, then rebuilt, destroyed, rebuilt, and that's all within the creation cycle of just this one tiny little cosmos. It appears in this one and many other universes too. So even just within the little tiny cosmos, within these cycles, he appears as these avatars many times over in different versions of the pastimes, different versions of the stories. And there's different versions simply because there's different times in which he appears in the same forms in different cases. Different historical incidences, basically, with similar characters and events, oftentimes. So, Matsya is when Krishna takes the form of a fish, a gigantic fish, huge fish. Now, right off the bat, people look at, well, okay, why is he taking the form of a fish, specifically? Okay, the universe is inundated with water, right? The whole place is flooded. So, okay, obviously, he's taking the form of a fish. It's kind of a fun thing to do, you know, if you're the supreme being, what form would you take, right? You know, you might take the form of a giant water serpent or something, but a fish pretty much makes sense too, you know, to carry on your back Manu, the progenitor of mankind and all of the species also. He's a progenitor of both the humankind and the various species. Basically rescuing all of these various species from devastation, start the new cycle. So then Krishna's swimming around, you know, he's looking very beautiful, very pleasant in this universal water, just swimming all over the place. You know, his form absolutely dazzling, and but his Matsya. So Krishna in that form, who is he meditating on then, right? So while he's swimming around in the universal waters, who is he meditating on? Well, Matsya is meditating on Sri Radha's form, and he's meditating on himself as Krishna with Sri Radha in their pastimes, of course. Now, why Matsya? Why the fish form specifically? Well, anyone who's familiar with the Ashtakaliya Leelas, or the daily pastimes with Radha and Krishna, they daily engage in water sports, where Krishna dips under the water and swims around between their legs, and where their clothing is getting stuck to their bodies and this type of thing. He's basically grabbing a bunch of things, moss and all the sorts of stuff from the bottom of the lakes, the rivers and things like that. And Krishna is referred to as a fish, as a giant fish swimming around in the water during those pastimes. And he's splashing them, you know, creating these huge cascade tidal waves and things like that. And also, his eyes, Krishna's eyes. So both Radha and Krishna's eyes are described as being what are referred to as sapphire fishes, or the correct pronunciation I'm kind of getting sour on, but Jafari fishes. There's a specific pronunciation, which I'm butchering right now. But this particular type of fish that Radha and Krishna, their eyes are always referred to as this type of fish, basically. So when her eyes are moving around, and when Krishna's eyes are moving around, they're referred to these fishes. Okay, it's a comparison because their eyes moving look like this type of fish, which the species of fish exists because Radha and Krishna's eyes move like this in the first place. So naturally, Krishna is appearing as a fish, hinting at the gopis, who are the goddesses of paradise, of Goloka, saying, hey, you're calling me a fish when I'm swimming around, so check this out. I'm literally going to swim around as a fish and save the entire cosmos here, and because you're referring to me as a fish, here, I'll appear as a fish. That's why he appears as a fish. And so he does so to make the gopis laugh. And in fact, this is the common ground theme you see across the board. Every form he appears in that form to make Sri Radha laugh, to give her joy, to give her amusement. So literally, what she refers to him as in their pastimes, he appears as those forms. So she says, oh, you're behaving like a fish right now, and like doing all this type of stuff. So therefore, boom, he appears as a fish. Simple enough, right? Oh, there we go. Okay. We'll increase the sound. This sound quality, Kakadi, is due to I'm speaking directly into my lousier computer mic instead of the headphones. That's why. The headphones proved unreliable recently, and they kept shutting off during mid-video, so I decided to go with lower sound quality, but guaranteed sound in this case. So, like underwater. Yep, there you go. No coincidences, right? And what's interesting about this, my friends, pay heed to this. The topic we're covering today has a lot to do with this water, the universal water concept, and guess what? Somebody gave me a free boat today. I'm not kidding. Just before doing this presentation, a few hours before. Yes. So this is very interesting how this stuff timings and correlations and things like this. So yep, I got the boat sitting right behind me, actually, right there. You can see it. A little dark green blob there is a boat, about an 11-foot long boat. So we're going to go on from there. So Matcha first, right? Okay, the fish makes sense now why it appears like this. And read the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, you'll see this. Them talking about him as being like a fish and him behaving fish-like in this way, And then Kurma, okay? So the next big form that he appears in is the form of a tortoise, a giant tortoise/turtle, basically. And on his back is held Mandara mountain. So on his back, you have this mountain which is held up that the Suras and the Asuras are both churning. The Suras and the Asuras are basically both the good and the bad Devas. Devas being divinely powerful beings, some good, some not so good, some evil. And they were both, on both sides, trying to churn this ocean of milk to try and get this nectar of immortality out of it, this elixir. So he decided the Mandara mountain started sinking underneath the water when they did this, so he appeared as the tortoise to lift it up onto his back. So this whole time he's sitting here as this gigantic tortoise, getting his back scratched by this huge gigantic mountain, right? It's being churned by two different sides. Now check this out. In the pastimes of Radha and Krishna and Goloka, what's going on? There's two different groups of cowherd girls, two different groups of goddesses. One group is tugging for Krishna. Hey, Krishna's our property. He's ours. That's led by Sri Radha. And then the other group, oh, we're yours, Krishna. We're your property. That's their consciousness. And then there's this tug of war going back and forth. And yes, they do play tug of war in Goloka like this. So, so when Krishna, and of course, Krishna himself likes to get his back scratched naturally. Okay. Now, now tortoises, of course, they're referred to and classified as being very slow, right? And basically closing up inside their shells like this, getting all balled up, right? So the slowness factor that's being referred to is basically Krishna himself, number one, moving very slowly after he gets out of the water, playing with the gopis in Vrindavana. And secondarily, the tortoise's ability to kind of like curl up into its shell like that, right, and hide, has to do with the Krishna being able to do that also in this form of Jagannath. If you're familiar, the arms sinking in and that big head type thing is one aspect of this. And of course, as the tortoise, the tortoise is referring to this patience, infinite patience, right? So basically, as the gopis are basically arguing amongst themselves and reprimanding each other and competing and things like this, they're actually ultimately working in unison, right? So basically, Krishna finds pleasure in this. He likes hearing both sides and then working in unison. So this tortoise form he's taking is, he's patiently hearing both sides, right? He's patiently hearing the loving reprimands of both sides, from Sri Radha and from the other gopis. And this is giving him infinitely more pleasure than the hymns of the Vedas. So naturally, then the gopis, they associate him with being like a tortoise in this regard. So, oh, you're excessively patient. What are you waiting around for? Why are you just standing there, etc., etc.? And then Krishna's like, hey, check this out. I'm a literal tortoise. So he sits there as the tortoise. Well, this huge mountain in the universe is getting churned, right? The nectar of immortality gets churned, and poison comes from that as well. They use Vasuki, the serpents, to do this, and Krishna refers to himself, of serpents, I am Vasuki. So Krishna also expands himself as the king of the serpents to make this happen. And of course, the reference to the churning of the rod is obvious, and you guys can put the two and two together in your heads what that's referring to more intimate, up-close pastimes, right? So by now, the tortoise, why Krishna appears as a tortoise, should be fully clear. And this should encourage you and inspire you to read more about Radha Krishna's pastimes and to read the Bhagavatam again. So now we're going to come to Varahadeva. Varaha is one of my favorites because I relate so strongly to why Varahadeva appears the way he does, and why he does what he does. Because it applies so well to the current situation right now, and to my personal situation in life that I've experienced regarding my own issues, struggles, etc. So I always meditate on Varaha to being the one who frees me and helps me lift myself from these burdens and encourages me in my eternal inclinations also. So Varahadeva, you ever heard the saying, welcome Zach, in this perverted reflection world, you men are like pigs, right? We hear this. In this perverted reflection of reality, we always hear females saying things along the lines of, oh, men are pigs, men are bastards, men are like this, men are like that, right? Well, that's simply the perverted reflection of the gopis referring to Krishna like that, in a loving way, of course, in the pure version. So they also refer to Krishna as a pig, oftentimes, as basically a greedy, nasty pig who just wants to get his way, etc., etc. And what is the pig associated with? The pig is associated with sticking its nose into stool, muddy ground, dirty and nasty places, things like that, right? So when Varahadeva appears, you guys are going to love this one. This is really trippy. It's correlated to something that had happened in the modern world also very recently. So he appears as this gigantic boar, right, in the material universe. And he comes to kill this asura, also known as a demon, named Hiranyaksha. Now, Hiranyaksha means golden eye, okay? Or in other words, eyes for gold, basically. And literally eyes that are golden. It has all of these meanings, basically. Hiranyaksha had light skin, shining golden hair, all these types of things. So he's all about gold. Now, when Varahadeva comes to slay him, he pulls up his mace, giant mace, and then, of course, Hiranyaksha does the same thing. The first thing Hiranyaksha says to him, basically in modern terms, he says it in a much more refined Sanskrit way, of course, but in modern terminologies, basically he says, oh, you're supposedly the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but you're appearing in this disgraceful, disgusting form of a boar. This is pathetic. And this is an insult, basically, to me. That's what Hiranyaksha was saying to him. And then Krishna just laughed, his little snorts, his oink snorts, right, which would have reverberated throughout the entire cosmos, right? And his eyes would have gotten ecstatic and also, lovingly angry at the same time. So then he starts, crushing at him with his mace and with his hooves and all this type of stuff. And it said their combat lasted 1,000 solid years. And as far as I know, that's 1,000 years according to heavenly timescales, which would be a huge amount of time for Earth. If we're dealing with heavenly timescales of 36,000 years now, if we're dealing with 1,000 years of a larger timescale, that's going to be even longer than that. So Hiranyaksha, what his focus was, he was wanting to grab the entire Earth plane, right? So within mystic powers, within mystic perfections, you can get to the point where you can have this ability where you can make yourself physically as large as you want, basically, to where you can literally become the size of the cosmos if you so desire to. This is an ability Hiranyaksha had achieved. So, but of course, with that power, you have to be very careful, because if you misuse it, you could just screw everything up and accidentally kill yourself, even if you're not careful. So, so what he did was he took this gigantic form, and he wanted to grab the entire Earth plane and bring it under the water at the bottom of this cosmos, which is the Garbhodaka Ocean. Now, maybe you would ask, well, why does he want to do this? Well, the reason he wanted to do this is quite simple, quite easy to understand. Because the Earth plane, especially our little part of Earth here in the center of it, or close to the center of it, I should say, the activities that we do here have an effect universally on who gets strengthened or empowered. So whether this strengthens the suras, the good devas in the heavenly worlds, or whether our activities strengthen the bad asuras, basically the demonic beings below the Earth plane, it is determined on to what degree those activities are engaged in devotion to Krishna, right? So you take the whole population as a whole on the Earth, collectively all of our thoughts, our desires, our intentions determine to which side is more empowered and more strengthened. So here in Yaksha's thing was like, okay, this human society, these human populations on Earth, they're basically, by having this ability to worship Krishna Vishnu and do this, when they worship him, the universe is benefited, they're benefited, etc. We down here in the lower worlds have more difficulty when that happens. So what we're just going to do is I'm just going to take the whole Earth plane and sink the whole thing this way. So the idea was to basically taunt Krishna to appear, to fight with him, and also to eliminate the ability of the human societies on Earth to be able to perform devotional activities by just drowning everybody, basically. So yes, very diabolical when you think at it, but very logical from the standpoint of if you're a demonic entity and you need to figure out how to eliminate human society from being able to have an effect on you universally, then let's just drown them all, basically. Quick solution. Demonic solution, but a very fast one. So that's what he did. He drowned them all, basically just pulled the whole thing underneath the water. And all these really interesting fossils throughout the world and stuff like this, because there's creatures at the bottom of this huge, gigantic ocean at the bottom of the universe, the Garbhodaka Ocean. Really amazing creatures and things like that. So a lot of those skeletons and shells and all sorts of this stuff, because this happened 1 billion years ago, or at least 1 billion years ago. So you're talking about basically everything down there just getting mashed up and landing on the surface of the planet, and then it gets lifted up, right? And then all that stuff just is there on the Earth and inside of it. So he comes as a boar, he kicks his butt, right, after this prolonged fight, and once the fight's finished, what he does right then and there, and there's different versions. Some versions he picks the Earth up over his head like this while he's fighting. Other versions he fights, then picks up the Earth. But the point is, that's what happens. Then he puts the Earth back in its original position, freed from being drowned underwater, and over time the human populations are put back on Earth and things like this. So, so he solves that. But what's really funny about this is the real reason he's coming in the form of a boar is in response to Radha and the gopis reprimanding him like this, about him being piggish and boorish and things like that. So what is a boar? So when he's lifting up the Earth, so remember this about Mother Bhumi. Mother Bhumi has a personal form, right? She has the beautiful curvy figure and all this other type of stuff. So that's her actual form. She expands her form as the Earth plane flat disc, but her actual form is like the female form. So once he goes underneath, basically, and who is he slaying? So he's killing the demon Hiranyaksha. Now these demons physically appear, yes, and they're actual beings that appear. They're Krishna's eternal servants for this pastime. But Hiranyaksha, golden eyes. Now, because everybody is always thinking, oh yes, Krishna's always meditating on Sri Radha's skin color, which is golden, right? Shining golden. So he's always thinking about her golden color, basically, which is true to a certain degree. But the reason he's killing Hiranyaksha in this case is Krishna saying, I'm not only meditating on the gold part of her skin, I'm also meditating on the parts of her form that are not golden. And you can put the rest together in your heads and understand this very easily. So, and then what does the boar do? He sticks his nose in the places that are forbidden places, right? And he's underneath. So there you go. It's very easy to understand why he appears as Varaha and what he's saying to the gopis when he does this, and to us who have the insight to see. Yep, exactly. Huge mammoth bones. But the mammoths, of course, those had been on Earth much longer after this, and as well. So, so yeah, and so Earth gets put back to this position, and Mother Bhumi, actually, who expands herself as the Earth plane, is his spouse. She is the spouse of Varahadeva, also, or I should say, one of his spouses. in a version of these pastimes. So yeah, everything about that one strikes a chord with me at so many levels, and hits home very deeply. Now, what's really interesting, a little tidbit of information. We always talk about encoding and all these really cool things. There was a video game out that you guys may know about, released on none other than the N64, right? Nintendo 64, which is also a significant thing. But the game was called 007 GoldenEye, right? Now, at first glance, that may not make sense, and then who is the name? James Bond, who's the character, right? Now, at the dead center of this Earth plane, the island is called Jambu Dvipa, okay? But Jambu is the first. Now think how similar the term Jambu is to the name James. And Banda, of course, where the name bondage eventually comes from. So, Jambu, bound to Jambu. Golden Eyes was the name of the actual Asura who attacked Krishna, Hiranyaksha. And then what we talked about numbers encoding 007. 7 always represents what? Water and information. So the flow of water and the flow of information at the same time. And 2 zeros is referring to Sri Radha herself and her, specifically the details of her form, which is why female forms have the 2 breasts, the hips, and all these types of things. Because quite simply, that's the zeros is where she is hiding her form behind. It's especially referring to the female form. So we're talking about all of these things being referred to, and that was one of the most popular games ever made, and it really kicked off the first-person shooter genre from that point forward. So any of you video game fans out there will know what I'm talking about for sure. Yep, it's called 007 James Bond GoldenEye. So this is just a good example of how there's so many of these things encoded and laying right in front of our faces for those who have the eyes to see. But yeah, so in other words, no matter what we do, no matter what we say, no matter what we create in the temporal world, it's always based off of the real version in some way, shape, or form. It's unavoidable, impossible to avoid. Yes, he did. So Bhaktisiddhanta, he also explains these things as well, as is correct. You have to go really deep into his writings, though. Pay very close attention to what he says. But just exercising devotional common sense, you can recognize why Krishna would do these things. It really doesn't take a whole deep lot of explanation or anything like this. So Krishna's always meditating on Sri Radha's form, so naturally everything that he does, all the expansions, are going to be related to her form. Tonight, I'm very surprised. It looks like it's only showing up. One person is on. Nitai, welcome, my friend. But I'm very surprised at that. Wow. I should say I'm not surprised, because most of the topics that I think will have the most views tend to have the least views, real time. And then the ones that I think will have the least tend to have the largest number of views. It always seems to play out that way for whatever reason. So, anyway. And then, of course, we'll move on from this. We talked about Narasimha's appearance in multiple other pastimes. Narasimha's is very easy to understand. Whereas, and up to this point, Krishna has appeared in animal forms, right? All 3. So he's appeared as a fish, tortoise, boar. Okay? Now he's appearing as a half man, a half lion. So transition between animal and human form, right? Now we've talked about this in a previous encoded video series stuff, and we talked about it in multiple other conversations. The gopis literally refer to Krishna as the man-lion of Goloka, the supreme man-lion. Literally, they refer to him as this. So naturally, Krishna is going to appear as a half man and half lion, saying, hey, check this out. I'm going to appear literally as a half man and a half lion to amuse you. And then what does he do? He arranges that the brother of Hiranyaksha, no doubt, Hiranyakashipu in this case, so gold, what? Gold and soft beds, right? So all the pastimes leading up to this were leading up to the bed. Now we're dealing with the bed pastimes themselves. So therefore, where does Hiranyakashipu get killed? On the lap of Lord Nrsimhadeva. And where do the pastimes of the gopis happen? With Krishna on his lap. There you go. So, Hiranyakashipu, golden soft beds, what happens is he tries to kill his son, Prahlada Maharaja, and that's a whole amazing deep topic itself, related to the killing of impersonal philosophy, etc. And how Krishna kills impersonal philosophy and rescues his devotees therefrom, for those trying to shove it down their throats. Hiranyakashipu tried to kill Prahlada in every way imaginable, and what he ended up doing was Nrsimhadeva grabbed him, got him on his lap on the threshold of his palace on Indraloka there, ripped his intestines out, straight up like that. Now that is, of course, representing and hinting to the gopis that, hey, this is me tearing off your clothing and your ornaments. Because what does he do? So when they're having intimate pastimes, what do? They grab each other's backs with their nails like this and scratch, claw, right? So that's exactly what Nrsimhadeva does. He takes his claws and rips out the guts of what? So what is he literally ripping apart? He's ripping apart their clothes and he's ripping off their ornaments. They're getting scattered everywhere. And that manifests physically as the Nrsimhadeva pastime in this universe. So now we can understand why he appears as Nrsimhadeva. Now, that was all within Satya Yuga. So that was all within the first age of this fourth cycle, Satya, Treta, Dvapara, and Kali Yuga. Now, in Treta Yuga, he appears as Vamana, the dwarf form, then as Parashurama, and as Rama. And then later on, of course, Dvapara Yuga, he appears as his original form, Krishna and Balarama. And then at the end of that, he appears at the earlier parts of Kali Yuga as Buddha, and then at the end of Kali Yuga as Kalki. Now, and there are different classifications in degrees of these avatars. So some of them are actually Krishna directly manifesting a Leela form, which Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, and Narasimha are all Krishna directly appearing as a playtime avatar. Leela avatars. Yes, material world is ultimately for the gopis' amusement, and ultimately not for punishment. Yes, Hiranyakashipu. And then there's so many layers to these things also. But of course, multiple side effects get fulfilled also in the process, which punishment for sins, etc., is one of the side effect things that happens and is dealt with by Krishna's secondary features and functions. And then, of course, he appears as Krishna and Balarama, then as Buddha, and then as Kalki. So you see this progression of how he appears and why he appears this way. Now, a lot of material concoctors or speculators, they basically try to look at this and say, oh, this is obviously referring subliminally to the evolutionary cycle or whatever. Like Helena Blavatsky brought this up, basically. You can even see this on Wikipedia. But the actual fact is this. Part of the reason Krishna appears like this in this order is also to scoff at and to make fun of those people who will, in the future, have those evolutionary ideas towards himself and towards his form. So he's just making it clear that, okay, I'm Krishna, two-armed, human form God, and I will just, of my own accord, appear in these animal forms, relating to my pastimes in paradise. And this is what's actually going on. The species all exist here, they're already present, etc. And then when Krishna appears as the fish, all the species were already present, and he just rescued all of the species that were already existing. None of this macroevolution stuff. And then, of course, Vamana is the dwarf. It's the dwarf avatar. Now, Krishna in Goloka, he does this pastime where he displays himself as this young brahmachari, serving at the temples and things like this, right? And he basically hides and he disguises himself like that in one of those pastimes. So, so Vamanadeva, and then Parashurama, of course, the legs of the gopis are referred to as large tree trunks a lot of times. And so this is something you'll see quite often. Now, and then manifests in a different way within the pastimes of Parashurama, where he's chopping down with his axe all these bodies of these corrupt kshatriyas and things, right? So basically, I'm skimming over the other ones. This presentation is more towards the animal forms, but I'm going to skim over the other ones too, so you guys can put the pieces together yourselves and see all this on your second, third, fourth read through the Bhagavatam. And then, of course, Ramachandra. Now, the gopis, they're always talking about to Krishna how he's such a debauch, how he's such a, lascivious, how he's all this and that and the other. And then Krishna's like, okay, you're going to say I'm a debauch, you're going to say I'm this and that, blah, blah, blah. Here you go. I'm going to appear in a way that's so dharmic, that's so righteous and so moral and so ethical that it's going to drive you crazy how ethical I am. And guess what? That's what he does as Ramachandra in Ayodhya. In fact, he's so moral and so ethical and so dharmically fixated as Lord Ramachandra that literally, even when he doesn't have any reason to whatsoever, and against everybody's protests otherwise, he abandoned Sita Devi when he didn't have to, and basically left her in the dust. To make the point, look, I can adhere to Dharma so much that it'll actually drive everybody mad how much I adhere to Dharma so strictly. You see? basically to refute the idea that Krishna is a slave of his senses. So whenever somebody has the wrong idea that, oh, Krishna is a slave of his senses, or this or that, or they try to artificially compare themselves to Krishna, oh, he's lustful like me, or this or that, all they have to do is read the Ramachandra pastimes. And that's simply Krishna making the point, actually, no, I can control my senses completely, and watch me do it, you see. And I'll make this very clear to everyone. So basically, yeah, he turns down every request of females romantically coming towards him, stays strictly devoted to Sita Devi, and not only does he stay strictly devoted, he ultimately abandons Sita Devi at the end. Yep. So basically, but how was he able to pull that off? Who was he meditating on while he was doing his pastimes as Ramachandra? How was he able to resist all these females that came to him and approached him? Okay, he's the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Majority. He can easily accept any female and not be agitated by lust. Of course he can. So why did he, or I should say, so who is he meditating on? He's meditating, of course, on Sri Radha. So how would he be able to give up Sita Devi and let her go like that? Because she's the expansion of who? Sri Radha. And that's who he's actually meditating on while he's doing his Ramachandra pastimes. Therefore, he's actually not distracted by Sita Devi's beauty either. Or anything of the sort. And his entire purpose as Lord Ramachandra is to make a point to the gopis, look how dharmic I am, watch, look how moral and ethical I am, see? And he does it to agitate them more and more, and to get them all intense, because they're calling him this debauch, and he's showing to them, no, I'm actually not the debauch that you're saying I am. It's like I'm a transcendental debauch, sure, in the real sense, but I'm showing to the whole universe, for now and for all time, that I am in full control of my senses. And I am able to adhere to Dharma beyond what anyone thinks is sane or reasonable, in fact. And that's what he does. So that's Ramachandra for you. And notice, Ramachandra's form was greenish tinged. And who else has a greenish tinged form? Kamadeva, the son of Radha and Krishna in Goloka. Or I should say, the sons of Radha and Krishna. And this is another very interesting fact also, that should not be overlooked. Why the green form, etc. So part of that is because he's in that consciousness of proving he's actually in the consciousness of proving his loyalty to Sri Radha over and above all of her expansions. That's Ramachandra. A lot of things, that's a fact that very few people know about Ramachandra. So now we're going to go on to, of course, Krishna and Balarama. They appear literally as themselves directly. And those pastimes are pretty self-explanatory as to why they do what they do, etc. Of course, those are definitely all about meditation on Sri Radha, her form, and things like that. So when you read Krishna and Balarama's pastimes, pay attention to what they're doing and what the exact details are, and you can see how their activities are related to their pastimes with Sri Radha in Goloka, manifested in an externally visible way. Of course, as the Buddha, Buddhi, that means intelligence, right? Now he comes to stop the Asuras from destroying planets, which is one of the things they were doing, either in this descent of Buddha or another one. And he teaches in a way that's fully misinterpretable as impersonalistic. So basically everybody that hears him thinks he's talking in personalistic philosophy, when a Buddha is really actually talking about devotion to Radha and Krishna, but people don't actually know that's what he's talking about. They just assume he's talking about impersonalism, right? But by the way he words things and what words he uses to explain transcendental concepts, etc. But ultimately, if you pay very close attention to what Buddha's actually saying, he's actually referring to the pastimes and the forms of Radha and Krishna in his words. And he's not actually preaching impersonalism at all, in fact. Nope. So, and then Kalki is, of course, when Krishna comes riding on the white horse with his gigantic sword, slashing apart all of the demonic armies, the last remaining Buddhists and everything else, to reestablish Satya Yuga for the whole universe. And when he does this, the next cycle of ages comes back in. And Sri Radha expands as Padmavati in those pastimes for Sri Krishna like this. So I hope this inspires all of you to now read more about Krishna's pastimes, to read more about his expansions, and to ever increase your appreciation for these expansions of Krishna. Because in devotion to Radha and Krishna, and them as Lord Chaitanya, you'll notice that your appreciation for all their expansions increases. The more you actually fixate on their forms as the central source, the more your appreciation for their expansions increases exponentially. And the more your eternal preference regarding those expansions will be revealed to you as time goes on. So yes, it looks like Natai, you're the one watching right now, my friend. If you have any further questions or comments, I'll carry it to the 1 hour mark in this case. And well, there's going to be big events happening around 2020. There are going to be definitely unique events related to Chaitanya's pastimes. A lot of the stuff that's going to be happening is going to be hugely based on how we use our free will too. So you could even say it's much less set in stone than Krishna's direct appearances as listed in the scriptures. Yeah. So there's a lot of potential right now in terms of 2018 to 2020. 2020 is the year that the flat Earth is going to really hardcore start becoming mainstream, and it already has to a major degree already it's become a mainstream view. But 2020 is going to be the things that are going to really kick off. You're becoming like the scales are going to really be tilted in our favor, starting that year especially. So, and it's related to all the stuff we're doing right now, these talks we're having, these discussions. We're going to be all contributors to that changing of the world's paradigm. So, and of course there's other forms of Krishna. These are basically known as the Dasha Avatars, the 10 major avatars. Krishna also appears as a female form, Mohini Murti, to show that he can lure literally anyone and everyone, including the greatest meditators, including the greatest devas. So Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, that he can break their meditations and cause them to lose semen just by how attractive he is in the female form. And of course there's Hamsa. He appears as a swan to show how to pluck out truth from falsehood, be able to pluck out the milk from water. And and yeah, he appears as all these various ways. But you can see clearly why he does so. So everything Krishna does, he does for a very specific, calculated reason. And as a prelude leading into next week's discussion, all the stuff related to the shape of the earth, the water beneath the earth, Krishna's pastimes is the boar lifting up the earth. There's so much of this stuff being talked about now, and that we're now actually covering with the maps and things like this, stuff that's been revealed to people all across the world. And so next week I'm going to specifically cover why and then how the shape of Mother Bhumi in her expanded form as the earth is directly related to Radha and Krishna's forms, and why us actually caring about this as devotees is a symptom of actually being appreciative of their forms, devoted to their forms. I'm also going to show how impersonalism, the tinges thereof, in the subconscious are directly connected to the globe model and maintaining the globe model thereof in the mind and heart. And so we're going to elaborate on this, and we're going to explain so many different things, hand signs and gestures we use, the face palm or the head palm, either one like that, is referring to a flat surface striking a around not flat surface. And so many things like this, in like that we understand and can see daily, and a lot of commonsensical things too. So the central point being that everything Krishna personally does is in meditation on Sri Radha. So literally you can look at anything Krishna does at all, period, across the board, any story about him ever, or in his expansions, and you can immediately see how and why it's connected to Sri Radha's pastimes of him in those eightfold daily pastimes. And you'll see this more and more every time you read through the Bhagavatam, why this is. And this is the reason those pastimes are ever fresh. It's 100%, 108% related to Radha's form in those pastimes. 108%, completely. She is the ever fresh factor of these stories. And of course, her pastimes with Krishna. Now, because, I mean, Krishna appearing as Chaitanya, what is he doing as Chaitanya even, eternally? As Chaitanya eternally, he's literally delving into the mood that Sri Radha has towards him and trying to ever go further into that and understand himself better. Right? By taking on her mood eternally. And that's Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So literally, even in Krishna's original source form, Chaitanya, Radha, and Krishna combined, he's still absorbed in this consciousness. Still. So, Lord Shiva makes it very clear too that the 1,000 names of Sri Radha, her form, her pastimes, her glories, empower an individual to have as close to the qualities of Krishna as possible, in the sense of you, because Krishna himself is eternally Krishna like that, and this is relationship with her due to constantly meditating on her. We can also obtain a very similar state to Krishna's state. Not that we, of course, we don't become Krishna directly. We still maintain our infinite individuality, which is what we prefer anyway. But we become, this evokes our eternal infinite uniqueness, which is like Krishna's. And you only do this by meditating on Sri Radha's form like he does. And this is why Krishna says, everyone follows my path in all respects, O Arjuna. What this means is, to whatever degree we follow Krishna's paths, to that degree we experience personal joy and happiness and peace of mind, etc. and inspiration in our devotion. And following that path means properly meditating on Sri Radha's form with the consciousness of giving pure love to her, which then translates to the ability to practice celibacy indefinitely for the individual who fully and genuinely does so, beyond theory, right? Thus, that is why Krishna himself is very easily able to, even beyond him being the Supreme Person, of course, especially why he's able to eternally, as he so desires, maintain celibacy with no problems whatsoever in the midst of all his pastimes. See? So, we can attain that state too by following Krishna's path like this, by seeing her form in all of the pastimes and all of the activities. Let's see here. Nitai. There's two other of my friends on, it looks like. Feel free to chime in, guys, either comments or questions. It looked like a lot of people had to skip off for the live side of it, which is alright. But somewhat surprising to me. Somewhat surprising. And, okay, so Nitai, you're talking about things, reiterating how much we surrender to Krishna and he surrenders to us. Well, it's more like this, and this is a more accurate way to look at it. So Sri Radha fulfills desires regardless. Okay, so both temporal and transcendental. She constantly encourages you in the transcendental direction, of course. But aside from just fulfilling your desires, she's always encouraging you in to realize your pure eternal state with her and Krishna. Whereas Krishna, he only fulfills and reciprocates to the degree that you actually desire what it is you desire with him, from him. So basically, in essence, Sri Radha, in a good way, forces on us pure love for Krishna, right? And so does Lord Chaitanya. Whereas with Krishna directly, when he's not specifically in the mood of Sri Radha, okay, so Krishna is in the mood of Sri Radha, spreading freely pure love of Godhead immediately and basically forcing it down everyone's throats, practically speaking, which is a good thing. That way you don't have to go through all this worry about. You actually don't have to surrender specifically when it comes to Sri Radha and Lord Chaitanya, because you do surrender, but your surrendering is more like a side effect to your inspiration and devotion, right? When it comes to Radha and Lord Chaitanya. Whereas with Krishna directly, it's more like, okay, you have to actually specifically want this first, then I'll give it to you if that's what you really want. You see what I mean? But it's like, okay, but if you want me and this other stuff also as well at the same time, okay, I'll give you both, and I'll give you me to that degree, basically. That's how it is with Krishna directly. Because Krishna's fulfilling all desires. So it's like, okay, if you desire me face-to-face personally, but you have this weird branch-off desire to use me sensually in this way or that way, etc., then I'll fulfill those desires too, but it's not going to ultimately satisfy you, and you'll have to go through these bursts to get that fulfilled all the way to the degree you want it, etc., etc. So that's kind of how it is with Krishna directly. So with Krishna face-to-face, you do have to completely surrender in the sense of completely fixating on Krishna 100% completely, with no mistakes. Whereas when you depend on Sri Radha and Krishna as Lord Chaitanya, you can, they pretty much take care of predominantly the surrendering side for you, actually, on your behalf, which is very interesting. And Nityananda, even more so, takes care of the surrendering side for you. So this is why it's so advantageous to meditate on the form of Sri Radha and the form of Lord Chaitanya, Radha and Krishna combined, because in this way, they freely give you pure love of Krishna. And then the surrendering follows as a side effect. Whereas if you're just fixating on Krishna directly, you specifically have to surrender, and then that's how you obtain, Krishna like that. Whereas with Sri Radha and Lord Chaitanya, you don't actually have to surrender. You just get to love freely and unconditionally. Because here's the thing. Unconditional is a broad-reaching word and term. Unconditional in the full, deepest sense means unconditional completely in the sense that, okay, you're just going to get pure love for Krishna freely. Welcome, Kakati Das. I encourage anyone who didn't get a chance, we covered a lot of really cool stuff up to this point. It's going to be very useful during the reading of the Bhagavatam, I assure you. It will be very helpful in so many ways. So, but now, we've talked about why Krishna appears, why he does what he does, etc., how we follow his path in all respects, and these things. Natai was talking about the surrender process, to the degree we surrender to Krishna, to that degree he gives himself to us, etc. And we're explaining how that works and why it works that way, with Krishna specifically. So, let's say you just have Krishna in your mind only, but you're not thinking about the gopis, you're not thinking about Krishna as Chaitanya, just Krishna. There's no specific meditation on the gopis or Sri Radha or anything like this, or his other associates. Basically, if that's the meditation, there's a huge ton of work involved actually getting to Krishna. Because basically, in that case, you really have to legitimately, psychophysiologically analyze all your desires and, really get them all, situated specifically to literally where all your desires are on Krishna. Definitely not an easy task, and like Arjuna was saying, it's more difficult than controlling the winds to do that. And then Krishna said, yes, with determination, with this and that, you can do it, you can pull it off, but what does it take? It takes determination, it takes meditation, it takes fixation, it takes all of these things which barely anybody in the entire universe has the ability to do. Even though it is within the realm of possibility to pull off surrendering to Krishna directly like that, it's extremely difficult to do so. Not easy. But Krishna just makes it simple in the sense that, so unconditional with Krishna directly is basically he unconditionally fulfills whatever weird, crazy, off-the-wall, strange desires you have, whether they're good for you or bad for you, and then he gradually brings you back to your original state and desires. Whereas Krishna in the mood of Sri Radha, Lord Chaitanya, and Sri Radha herself directly, they bring us back immediately to Goloka as quickly as possible. They constantly bombard us with the understanding of our original consciousness, our original nature, who we are with them, etc. And they themselves take care of the surrendering process in the sense that you just naturally become surrendered to Krishna by following Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sri Radha, setting the example of that. So basically, Krishna's like, okay, you can do it that way. You can meditate on me directly as Krishna and go through all that work, which is really challenging to pull off. Or you can just surrender to me like this, dancing around Hare Krishna, seeing how I'm in everything, seeing how I'm connected with you, meditating on my pastimes with the gopis and Goloka, etc. And by doing so, you will reattain your highest state with me, this and that. You see? So basically, you can do it the really challenging way, or you can do it the very easy way. So the whole point is, why not take the easy way? Because not only is it the easy path, but it's actually the most uplifting, most exciting, and most inspiring path, and it's actually the way you would ultimately have to end up meditating on Krishna anyway. Because that's what Krishna's hinting at in the Bhagavad Gita, but he's just holding back and not being able to fully say it because of an agreement he had with Sri Radha. He's like, okay, I'm going to tell them about me here directly, Krishna, but I'm just going to remain mostly silent about you, but I'm still going to hint about you to them. And then, by golly, I'm going to appear in your mood to actually reveal to them what I want to reveal to them about our pastimes, about us, etc. So Krishna was really like biting his lip, holding back on a lot of what he wanted to say in the Bhagavad Gita. A lot. And that was because Sri Radha wanted him to kind of leave it to the devotees who decided to go that route of fixating on surrender to Krishna like that, leaving him that option, that ability to do that. But he's like, but you know what? I can't take this, because he spoke the Bhagavad Gita as it is, and guess what? Barely anybody in the world, except a small, tiny little line of disciples, right, and a couple individuals surrounding them, talking to them, maintained the actual teachings about Krishna. Literally everyone else in the entire cosmos misunderstood, forgot Krishna's teachings, didn't correctly understand who he is, etc. So he's like, okay, I'm going to come as Lord Chaitanya, here we go. We're just going to show everybody exactly how to do this. And that's it. So... And there's a lot of stuff you're mentioning, Yatai. have to talk about a lot of it a bit later. You're talking about the Satya Yuga Vishnu thing, etc. So just remember that, and when Krishna appears as Chaitanya, he engages in and hints to everybody all these different pastimes. The ones he does with Sri Radha and the ones that he does as his expanded forms, as Vishnu, as the half-man, half-lion, the boar, etc. And he does this through the course to show people, yes, I actually am Krishna, yes, but it's like, but this is who I really am. It's Lord Chaitanya. It's like, okay, this is who I am also, but this is who I really am. And he always brings it back to Lord Chaitanya, him being Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the original source form of the Supreme Person. Anything else, my friends, before we wrap it up here? Yeah. Well, in Satya Yuga, things were much more challenging in terms of transcendental realization, because you literally had to sit down and meditate on Krishna either in his two-armed form or his four-armed form, Krishna as God, basically, as Vasudeva. That's what that mantra is. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. That's meditating on Krishna in his two-armed form, and or his expanded four-armed form from that two-armed form, where you're meditating on Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, basically. And so you're meditating on him like that. And back then in Satya Yuga, yeah, it was even harder and more challenging for people to make it to Goloka than it is now. In fact, being able to make it to Goloka Vrindavana is very rarely offered to anyone, ever. So the fact, and Krishna appearing as Chaitanya to reveal all of this stuff about himself, about all of his avatars and things, this also very rarely happens. So everything we talked about today happens only once in either a day of Brahma or a lifetime of Brahma. Either one, it's a huge, insane time frame. So many Kali Yugas go by without Krishna ever appearing as Lord Chaitanya and without him ever revealing these things about Radha and Krishna and himself to us, ever. We just so happen to be in one of the smallest universes, if not the smallest universe. And on top of that, we're here appearing just barely 500 plus years after Chaitanya appeared in this cosmos on this planet. So we are by far the most fortunate of anyone in the entire universe to have Lord Chaitanya's direct footsteps walking on this planet. So without any further ado, I just want you all to just daily, as you're meditating on Radha and Krishna, appreciate all of their expansions, appreciate all of their various forms that they appear as, and also appreciate why they do so. Appreciate everything about themselves, transcendental world, and everything about the temporal worlds as well, material worlds, which emanate from them as perverted reflections. Doing this, you will understand how your conditional life is the perverted reflection of your original form and personality, and you'll understand in what way you're most attracted to Krishna, and in what way you're most attracted to his expansions. Because, of course, the science of self-realization at the end of the day is the science of who you are. How you are infinitely unique, what your eternal preferences are. That's Krishna consciousness. And by so doing, everything else about everyone else is revealed at the same time. Who they are, what their preferences are. So meditate on this daily, these avatars. It is said that daily meditation on these Dasha avatars of Sri Krishna brings all auspiciousness to the mind and heart and relieves one of all obstacles and guarantees one the highest transcendental state of realization and empowerment, an achievement of which there is no greater achievement. So we always preach this message, and we always will for the rest of eternity, that the more you fixate on Sri Radha's forms and personalities, to that degree you will increase your appreciation for all of their various expansions, in direct correlation to the degree that you appreciate Radha and Krishna. To the degree that we do not appreciate Radha and Krishna and Lord Chaitanya, to that degree we will lack and lose appreciation for their expansions and avatars, in direct proportion to that. So take the quick, fast, easiest route back to paradise. Chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra every day and in every way. Make every word you say into a name of Krishna. Make every term you use a term referring to one of his names. Make every step a dance, and make every one of his names a continual song coming out of your voice. With that, I bid you all a fond farewell and a fine evening. Hare Krishna. Hare Haribol. Jaya Shri Radhe.